The work of the COPS Office is vital to state and local law enforcement agencies, and by extension, the safety of our communities. The COPS Office is the cornerstone of our nation's policing strategy, community-oriented policing. The hiring program, its work in collaborative reform, and efforts to improve officer safety and wellness is critical, especially at this time. Today we're joined by Hugh Clements, the director of the COPS Office. Hugh has extensive experience in law enforcement, starting in 1985 with the Providence Police Department as a patrol officer, and eventually became the chief. Hugh also is a longtime member of the Fraternal Order of Police and a member of our National Board of Trustees. He is a decorated officer, nationally recognized expert, and speaker on law enforcement trends. I am Patrick Yoes, National President of Fraternal Order of Police. This is the Blue View. Well, Hugh, thank you for coming to to our podcast. Hugh and I go back a long ways, probably 2-3 decades of just great friendships, and just admired the way you've handled yourself over those years. For our viewers that maybe don't know you, tell them a little bit about yourself.
So, Mr. President, Pat, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I just came from the field in the beginning of February of 2023 to the Department of Justice, the COPS Office, Community-Oriented Policing Services. I spent a career in the field, 38 years with the Providence Police Department, capital city of Rhode Island. 38 years I came up through the ranks. I spent about half my time in patrol, coming up through the ranks, and each time you make rank, you have to go back to patrol, which I always enjoyed. And the other half on the investigative side, in detectives, narcotics. Spent a lot of time investigating cases, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. I mean, that was my real passion. But I always really gravitated to going back to uniform, and I really found my greatest joy when I went back to uniform as a lieutenant. And we began the community-oriented policing approach locally in Rhode Island. And that was the most rewarding portion of my career, working closely, being a mini police chief at the time in this respective community, a hard-hit, tough community. And then, so that was 26 years on both sides of the shop, investigative and patrol. And then my last 12 years as chief of police.
I look at our profession. And you have been when you look at community-oriented policing and what it stands for, just the pure definition of it, you've kind of lived it your entire life, long before you ever came to the COPS Office. I've always admired the way that you've been a leader, obviously in the FOP for years as well. That's how you and I know each other, but also within your community. It doesn't matter whether or not you're part of the community or some of the groups that you would think that would be, potentially, have negative opinions of the police and the officers themselves. Everybody respected the way that you went about it. That community-oriented policing is something that's really embedded into your whole career.
Yes, and I think it came naturally, and then I surrounded myself with some tremendous women and men who wear the uniforms, want to serve, and they developed and had a passion for the city. Oftentimes the city they grew up in, they went to school in, they came from, and even if they didn't, they just had great passion for people and compassion for those who maybe didn't have the same opportunities that they did growing up. And, some of the communities and some of the situations we worked in were very trying and difficult. And towards the community policing front, I would say that community policing is labor intensive. It takes a lot of time and a lot of work. And much of what we do in the policing world, and you and I know, Pat, this profession has changed significantly. We have transformed this profession over the last 35 years. You and I came on the job the same time, you in 84, me in 85. It has changed immensely over the years. But community policing is labor intensive. And I've always said that community policing is a co-producing event with both the community and the police department. And that is important. And you build that structure and that capital in the community, and you celebrate the successes along the way in your community, but as well, you live the blood, sweat, and tears of many of these communities. And the community appreciates that co-producing partnership.
And when you look at law enforcement, just in general, the very powers that we have as law enforcement officers are directly related to trust of our communities. And if you look across this country, I mean, look, there's a huge contrast. There are agencies across this country in cities, and yours was one of them, who had such a strong working relationship with the public that it was a force multiplier. You just didn't have a police department, which you had as a community that was invested in a safe, a safe strategy. And you look at those communities across this country, they truly get it. They're not the ones that are struggling, like some cities that are just an adversarial relationship with their law enforcement. And so you definitely did it right.
And many departments have, and I think those departments that do it right, they look at their police department as almost like the hub of the power wheel. Even if they wanted streetlights fixed in their community, or traffic signals, or public works type activity, they would go through their district commander. They would go through their police department. As you know, Pat, because you've done it too, you take phone calls on the wildest things that have nothing to do with your power as a police officer, but they looked at you in your duty in serving your community like someone who could get this done,
Yeah.
and that meant a lot to them.
Well, yeah, the fact that they're reaching out tells you that that's half the equation right there.
That's
There's
right.
some trust and some belief that that's going to be taken serious. So the entire model, I think there's a lot to learn of those cities that truly get it by some that are maybe struggling. Let's shift a little bit.
Mhm.
There's and I want to thank you. We brought in about 80 leaders from across the country. ATF allowed us to use the auditorium, and we had a summit to talk about recruiting and retention across the country. An existential threat that exists within our profession, the damage that has been done, is starting off with COVID and followed by all of the unrest and, defunding and reimagining. All of these things have really taken a toll on law enforcement profession. And not surprisingly, it's also taken a toll on the amount of people who are stepping up and being the next wave of law enforcement. So we find ourselves in a position now where people are leaving at a pace that we've never seen before. And we're just not having as many of the best and brightest stepping up and being part of our profession because of a number of factors. So I want to thank you for being part of that. I think there's some really great thought that came out of it. But one thing, probably the strongest, that and you and I were talking just before we started this, is that they all want leadership. They every single, when we put everybody together and we talking about leaders of unions across this country, the largest police, money's important, benefits are important, but probably the highest on the list is they just want leaders. Let's talk about where we are at a space and time and the path forward to get the best and brightest attracted back to this profession, so that we don't have this brain drain where we've seen all this experience walking out of the doors. And in a lot of agencies, we have people who have very little experience that are in leadership roles because they don't have as many people in the agency, that they've lost all that knowledge.
And you're exactly right. I mean, these last couple of years have been a moment, and we remain in that moment that's not likely to be rectified in the space of a year. It may take a 3, 5 year, 10-year period, a decade to amend. But traditionally, in the time that we came on the job, police departments and police leaders were recruiting for young men and women, predominantly back then, young men. And so I think that's part of what we'll speak about is police leaders and police agencies really need to think differently of who they're recruiting on their force. But those leaders in those departments were recruiting for a sense of adventure. And you saw that in their pamphlets, in their advertising material, in their recruiting efforts in the community. But now I think it's shifted, and rightfully so, to a sense of purpose. We become more of a community-oriented profession, and I think we have to look at switching the way we actively recruit members to enter this workforce. I know one of the buzzwords, and I believe in it strongly, is we're looking for young men and women who have a high degree of emotional intelligence, who really can sympathize and empathize with those in need. And So there are so many things that came up at that session. I believe it was in April, and I want to
Yes.
thank the Fraternal Order of Police for being a big voice and a big part of that session, along with many of the other major policing groups and groups from the community as well. We've talked about recruitment and retention for 20 years, for 10 years, but it's changing on the fly all the time. This is the latest guidance, fresh guidance. I think it's very well done, is to what agencies and municipal leaders can look at to attract the best and the brightest without lowering standards.
Right.
And I think we speak about that all the time. Like, look, if we're going to lower the standards, we're not doing anyone favors.
Absolutely not.
And we're
We're
not.
actually creating the problems.
And we know that from past history.
Right.
So, but there was some really good guidance that came from it, including some of the things that just hold everyone back. And there's a very competitive job market. So this generation, where every generation is different, but if they have an intent of entering this workforce for a sense of purpose, and it just takes too long, and they get sent in so many different directions, they're going to move on to something else.
Oh, no doubt.
And one of the things, even in my own agencies, things just got bottlenecked with the testing process, and oftentimes we lost really good, valuable recruits to other agencies or to other professions because the testing process took too long.
Right.
And I think we need to look at creative ways to streamline that process and to attract the best and brightest. And as well, we've done fairly well with recruiting a newer workforce, including getting young men from very well educated who are not happy in their profession, whether it be accounting, lawyers, Ivy League schools, that saw they could enter a profession for that sense of purpose and really make an impact in their community. And you and I know, Pat, there is no other profession like a police officer.
You make a difference. You make a difference.
You can make a difference where you have the ability to impact a young boy, a young girl, a young man, a young woman, a family, an entire public housing development. You can impact an entire community with one act. Yeah. And I say all the time, used to say all the time at roll calls that, every interaction counts. Make it a good one.
That's it.
Because if it's a bad one, you could end up on CNN, Fox,
That's
ABC, NBC, and with a bad interaction.
I had another one to you. Maya Angelou said that people won't always remember what you told them, but they will remember how you made them feel. That's it.
That's right.
And you're dealing with people on some of their worst days, and they're looking for some help. And the way that you approach that, you can make a profound difference in somebody's life.
We have that ability. I mean, it is an awesome responsibility.
Absolutely.
To raise your right hand and wear a patch for whatever community, city, sheriff's office, and to wear a badge and to have that power of arrest. But the ability to really make an impact, there's no other job like it.
I want to carry that a little further. I want to talk about some of the support that comes out of the cops office. Before we do, I want to talk a little bit more about recruiting. Before we could fix a recruiting problem, and I know you'll agree with me on this, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. I'm of the opinion that you can't fix recruiting until you fix retention. I did it's dated now. When I was in college, I did a survey, a rather large survey, on why people got into law enforcement, what attracted them to it. And it's not surprising that about a little better than 80% identified the fact that somebody within law enforcement saw and took an interest in them and said, you know what, this might be a good fit for you. You ever thought about going to the academy and kind of recruited them, found them, recruited them, and brought them in. It was that personal contact that made it happen. And so now we fast forward now at a time when, the demonization of law enforcement over a period of time has taken such a toll. How many law enforcement officers are excited about going find that next person and saying, hey, you've got what it takes to be the law enforcement officer? That those numbers took a hit. So until we recognize that, I don't know how we fix a recruiting problem, because our biggest recruiters are the people who are on this job themselves. And in a lot of agencies across this country, they're just not feeling appreciated.
And you're right. And it's one of the reasons why I take this job. And this is not a quick fix. And I do not anticipate on amending this in a 1-2 year term. But one of the reasons why I was excited about this position was an opportunity to elevate the image of this profession, what I think is the greatest, the most noble profession in the work that we do in our communities. Number one, and I speak to many large groups about the work we do in the cops office. And one of the groups I speak to is they all had recruitment and retention very high on their list with problems in policing, if not number one. Every single group that I spoke to, including National Leagues of Cities and Towns and the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And was delivering the same message to each of these groups, that it's important for political leadership as well to recognize. And one of the things I learned at that session, and as I took this role, where I came from, retention really wasn't a big issue, but I did recognize in speaking to predominantly larger agencies, retention is a huge issue as you speak around the country. So we need to look at, how do we hold on to valued employees who love the work they do in the field? And we should spend probably more time trying to hold on to those that have already established themselves in the profession, at least as much time as recruiting, because, you know, they want to stay. In a survey that Fraternal Order Police recently done, I think it was over 85% of the workforce still were proud to wear the uniform, be a police officer, love their job, but had a lot of questions about, you know, the negative aspects going around and white noise around their profession. But they wanted to remain on the job. And I think we need to fix that. And I think you're spot on. Before we take that next step, we need to fix that.
Yeah. Hugh, let's talk about, the whole structure. There's some great people in the cops office do some amazing work, and giving the tools to law enforcement agents across this country to be able to make a difference through training, through research, through a number of things. And I love having you there with your law enforcement experience. I know you bring a lot to the table with it, but something that we're real proud of is some of the grant funding that comes out of the cops office, and allows us to be able to do things that are important for our function, to be able to raise that heightened awareness of just how difficult our job can be at times, both on a physical and mental state. And I'd like to just talk about a few of them. Obviously officer wellness is a big one, and we receive, Fraternal Order Police has some substantial funding coming from the cops office. We appreciate that, and it allows us to create programs that are helpful for our members. You look at the average person. Average person might have 3, 4 traumatic events in their lifetime, and we know a traumatic event can change somebody physically, mentally. Well, law enforcement officers have that repetitive. I mean, they may have that 100 times in their career, 180 times in their career. I've heard a whole bunch of different numbers, but the reality is we're all human. When you see the worst of humanity, you're dealing with some of these things that that it's going to take a toll on you. And officer wellness is so vitally important in what we do. I look at law enforcement officers when we hire them. They go through psych evaluations, they go through physical evaluations, they go through the academy, do all of these things, and it doesn't take long before they find themselves in a group that has higher susceptibility to a lot of things that the average public doesn't have. So to think that somehow it doesn't take a toll on it. And the wellness programs that we do is so important. I'd like to just hear your views on, and I know the support you give us is great. Very much appreciated, but your views on officer wellness and what we're asking ordinary people to do every single day, and somehow think it doesn't affect them.
It really is imperative for us to feed and fuel the field around the Lean-Wild Law Enforcement Mental Health and Wellness program that we have. And we've dedicated quite a bit of money from the cops office to the field, and we appreciate the hard work of the FOP. Sherry Martin does a fabulous job in the field, and I always give her a shout out, but well-deserved. Yeah. And look, you're right, Mr. President. The emotional trauma that police officers deal with on a day-to-day basis, it adds up, and it affects all of us differently. I thought about it when I retired. I really didn't think about it much as I was going along the way, because one call leads to the next, and 1 year leads into the next, and one promotion and assignment leads to the next. But that emotional trauma in all these situations you've been involved in adds up. In my era in the Providence Police, we lost 4 officers killed in the line of duty. And, those are blood, sweat, and tears of an agency. Not only officers killed in the line of duty, but officers you lose through illness, whether it's cancer or whatever. But it really is a second family. the policing world, and the emotional trauma. So I think there's 3 levels of distress that police officers deal with. And I think one is the high trauma and emotional trauma you receive from critical incidents, whether you're being involved in a shootout or responding to a horrific car accident with a young child or a young couple involved, or a sexual assault. I mean, every single day, police officers are dealing with critical incidents and very high emotional trauma situations. Secondly, organizational distress and cultural distress. And thirdly, operational distress.
Yeah.
So all of that builds up on the officers, and we can't do enough around wellness and support, work-life balance.
Yeah.
And especially with this newer generation that we're trying to attract into the workforce, they want to hear a lot more about work-life balance, being home more with their families, rightfully so.
Yeah.
A lot of these young men and women, they just started a family. Some of them are couples. They're both in law enforcement. And they need their agency to recognize that they love what they do, but they need that balance.
And need that balance, and they need it in the very beginning. They don't need it after there's a problem. And that's it needs to be built into our academies. It needs to be built in every aspect we do in our in-service training, and preparing our law enforcement officers and their families for a productive and healthy life in this profession. So great work that's being done. We couldn't do it. We absolutely couldn't do it without the cops office. So we do appreciate the support that comes there as well. I want to talk about one more, something that's kind of, you would think, in an area where the statistics are kept on everything. Mm-hmm. There was one statistic that was never kept, and that was how many law enforcement officers are being shot in the line of duty. And so the Blue Alert Grant, something that we work closely with the cops office, allows us to be able to track that data, and it shows the trends that are happening across this country. It brings attention to how dangerous our job is. But that would not be possible, and no one else is collecting that data. It would not be possible if it would be the support of the cops office. So thank you for that as well, which brings us to a pretty disturbing topic, and that is the attacks on law enforcement. So far this year, we're recording this in advance, but so far this year, we still have 6 months left. 6 weeks left in this year, and we've already matched the amount of officers shot last year.
That's right.
So we're going to set a record this year, unless a miracle happens. And we're seeing that progression is happening every single year, give or take a little bit here or there, but we're seeing more and more law enforcement officers being shot. But I guess probably most disturbing is the amount of officers that are being ambushed, attacked just because of who they are. There's some disturbing trends here that are happening across this country, which are, from your perspective in the cops office, tell me what's being done to recognize that, and how some grant funding is helping combat this issue across the country.
So first off, the cops office is proud to partner with the Fraternal Order of Police on this very appropriate, congressionally funded award package, and appropriately named after Officers Ramos and Liu from the NYPD. I believe it was 2014, in a horrific ambush attack. And you're right. This year, I think we sit at, sadly, very sadly, 325 police officers have been shot this year. And that's the data collected by the FOP. And in those, I think there are 102 ambushes.
Yeah.
That's a disturbing.
And it's increasing every year.
That's incredible to me, in a very disturbing way. And of those 102 ambush attacks, 22 officers have been killed. So it's a data trend that is clearly going in the wrong direction and speaks to the dangers of this profession. And we can't do enough to support the men and women who courageously and bravely go out there and serve. But it's unfortunate, because they're sitting ducks by the mere fact they wear a uniform and serve their communities. And it's we're doing a lot surrounding law enforcement, mental health and wellness. But there's Blue Alert Network. Right now, we have 37 states that are actively involved. We're looking to get all 50, get the District of Columbia, and get our territories, get everyone involved in the National Blue Alert Network. Great program. Began with the formation and the start from the FOP, and we appreciate your leadership, Mark McDonald. We appreciate his efforts on this front.
You know, Hugh, before we turn the cameras on, you and I were kind of reminiscing about the changes we've seen in our long careers of law enforcement, from where we were there to where we are today. So much more that law enforcement has never been more educated or than they are today, better equipped. All of this, is a journey that we've watched to develop over time. From the cops office perspective, what do you see in the future?
So yes, obviously we have some huge challenges ahead of us with recruitment, retention, violent crime, the landscape on that, the violent nature, almost the more horrific in the eyes of the criminally intent, the better it is in their eyes. So it's disturbing on our end. So all of the programs we have in the cops office are dedicated to the new trends going on in law enforcement. And I need a moment at this time to thank the members of the cops team. When I first took over, they told me that, welcome to the cops office. Congratulations. You'll be the director, but you'll be the only cop in the office. But these men and women that work in that agency, they care so passionately about the work in the field and the buckets that we have for funding in the field. And they, along with the leadership, pick these buckets of the cops hiring program, which is the flagship program, school violence prevention, preparing for active shooter, the anti-methamphetamine and heroin programs. Fentanyl is killing communities across this country.
Yes,
but all of these efforts are the future trends of policing, and technology is going to play such a huge role in our efforts in law enforcement, because we know, this recruitment retention thing is not going to fix itself in the next year or two. Number one, it'll take a decade maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
But number two, I think we really need to recognize the amazing advent of technology. Technology is improving so quickly that the regulation can't keep up with it quick enough.
Yeah.
But we've already seen it in the last couple of years with, body-worn cameras, red light cameras, speed cameras, license plate readers, all to assist in our efforts of making our community safer. And I think they've been great additions to the field. And I think we'll see more as we go along the way. And speaking to leaders in the technology industry, I think we need to continue to have our eye on that vision and technology, but it will always be about the relationships and partnerships in the community and building trust in the community.
Well, I can tell you, I'm going to I absolutely agree with you. My interactions with the cops office and the staff there has been absolutely great. You're right; they're very much invested in and believe in what they're doing, and just a great asset to law enforcement agencies across this country. Somebody wants to know more about the cops office and some of the grant funding that's available. What would be the best way to go about that?
So very simply, go online and go to USDOJ Cops Office, and the website is fantastic. And the Cops Office not only provides a ton in the form of grants, but we do a lot of work in training and technical assistance with the great work we do in CRITAC, Collaborative Reform Initiative Technical Assistance Center, of which the Fraternal Order of Police is a valued partner in that field. And the third bucket that we provide a lot of resources to the law enforcement arena in is the resources in the form of publications, guidance. The website has all of the publications from the beginning of the cops office, so I urge everyone to go to that website. And we also have an online training portal. And where in this day and age where training is key, training is the main ingredient in everything we do. And oftentimes it's the first thing cut in a budget. Well, you can get free training and technical assistance from the cops office. Hopefully your agencies get the grants that you apply for, but the needs far outpace the funding. But what everybody can get is the free training, technical assistance, and the online training portal.
Wow. Hugh, thank you for all you do. Thanks
to
all the members of the cops office for the hard work that they do, and Department of Justice, BJA. We just great working relationships, and this is truly a journey we all take together.
And I thank you and the FOP for the partnership.
And to our viewers and listeners, Thank you for tuning into the Blue View podcast, where we talk about the issues that are so vitally important to the men and women who suit up and show up every single day in communities across this country and make a difference. Thank you.
Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. To get the latest from the National FOP, make sure to follow us on Twitter and Facebook at GLFOP and on Instagram at FOP National. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.